Colleagues, good evening. I think we'll start in the next few minutes. I just realized, I'm switching in between accounts, right? So my workspace is, so the account I use to create this thing here, the meeting link for this interaction, apparently is a completely different account, an account I hardly ever use. So I just realized that when I was setting up the recurring meeting, I did not. I hope this thing is recording also. I did not add my UNZA assigned email address as a co-host. So apologies for that. But that being said, I suppose the upside to all of this is that this is our very first interaction, and so it should be fine here. Yeah, I think my plugin is working now. The plugin is kind of working now. Okay, so with that being said, I think what we can do is we can essentially start. Today's interaction is ideally meant to be what a lot of people that teach for a living will call Administrivia or something, and course introduction. So it's going to be a bit laid back. And also, I think just to mention that I think one of the interesting things about this course is that it has practical implications for almost all of us. Well, not almost, all of us, right? So this notion that we are all expected to make use of a number of things that we're going to discuss in this course. Also, I think it's only a course where we, for the first time, I think we are attempting to see if we can have all the teaching staff kind of participate. It would be nice to invite people to come through. Some people that you probably haven't really interacted with, in part because maybe their focus is largely on undergraduate programs, or perhaps our postgraduate diploma programs, ideally. But it's quite a large department, really. Okay, so I've just shared my screen. If you know of colleagues that may have forgotten about the class, especially if you're maybe a course rep or something, kindly ask if you can remind them about what is happening, so that we're on the same page going forward or something. Okay, so with that being said, maybe a thumbs up or something if you can hear me just fine, and also if you can see I know you can see my screen because I can see my screen. I'm on my other device, so I imagine you can just fine also. I know for a fact that well, maybe for a fact, but I believe I've interacted with almost all of you, and I'm saying almost all of you because what we've done is we've also extended we've essentially extended an invitation to students that are pursuing different programs, but perhaps may find value in what we're going to be discussing in this course. And specifically, I'm making reference to the fact that, and I think you're probably all aware of the fact that in the department, insofar as these advanced degrees are concerned, and I want to draw attention to our master's programs and also our doctoral programs, primarily because, this is a master's level, course, but research is research, right? It doesn't matter if you're doing it at undergrad, in industry, at master's or PhD. So it turns out that in the Department of Computing and Informatics, or rather, let's start with the UNZA here. The University of Zambia, ideally, the University of Zambia offers a range of postgraduate programs, okay? The lowest being what's called a postgraduate diploma, right? Typically, in our department, this would act as a bridging course for individuals that may want to pursue, let's say, a master's degree, for instance, but do not have the prerequisite coursework. So they're encouraged to pursue a postgraduate diploma program, which is typically a year long, ideally. It's a postgraduate program, so there's that, right? The other type of postgraduate program we have at the UNZA called master's degrees, is it? Right? And then you have your doctoral degrees or something, so-called PhD. Now, if you look at your master's degree, there's three main types of master's degrees. So you can enroll into what's called a TOT. Well, if you look at the guidelines, it's called a professional master's. Okay. And it turns out that in our department, currently, as of this year, actually, we only have one master's program that is actually taught or administered under this tag, right? Professional master's. This is a master of computing in data science. Okay, and so the idea behind this is you focus on teaching, really. So it's a taught only, ideally. So sometimes there'll be reference to the fact that I'm pursuing a taught only master's or something like that. And then you have what's called a taught, and dissertation masters. And the idea behind this is there are two parts. So there's part one and part two. In part one, what you do is you focus on teaching. So you spend the first year doing coursework. And in fact, it's the reason why we have colleagues that are pursuing the Master of Computing in Data Science program enrolled into this mandatory research methodology course, right? It's tagged as 5019 or something. The other type of masters that we have at the UNZA is what's called a master's by research. So what typically happens to the master's by research is you enroll into the program, and the first thing you do is you just jump into the research. Typically, this is reserved for individuals that have extensive background insofar as research is concerned. Yeah, so there's that, right? So we have a mix of people in here. And then when it comes to doctoral degrees at the UNZA, you have what's called, again, it's a professional PhD, right? There is such a thing as a professional PhD. And typically, I think you find these mostly, I think, at graduate school of business or something like that. Okay, so the focus here, again, is on teaching. This is a taught only, right, as well. Besides the professional PhD, you have what's called, again, similar to the master's, is a taught, right? Taught and thesis, PhD, ideally. Okay, so you have a mix of coursework that you have got to do, and then you do the research part. And then finally, you have what's called a PhD by research. Not final, actually, it's a PhD by research, it's also a PhD by publications, right? So the idea behind the PhD by research is, and in fact, if you look at our department, we only offer doctoral studies by research. Okay, it's a reason why if you're one of our PhD students who saw the notification where we're encouraging you to audit the course. So in essence, you actively participate in the course, but you don't necessarily have to sit for exams and do assessments, right? Like write tests. If you want, you can write them. One of the reasons we did that is because we have this this perception that there could be people that have been out of school for a very long time, right? So the last time you did your master's will probably be years ago, and you probably have forgotten the fundamentals as they relate to research. But also we had a number of our colleagues that are enrolled into these doctoral programs seek clarification, because the only course they have got to enroll into is 7,000 ideally. Okay, so this is if you look at the program document, CSC 7,000 is tagged as proposal writing and I think it's called, is it dissertation writing, but it's a thesis, right? Because it turns out that there's a difference between and you notice I've been very careful here. There's a fundamental difference between the thesis and the dissertation, is it? Right? What you notice is that if you are pursuing, for starters, if you're pursuing your PhD and you've already started interacting with your supervisors, this is another thing, right? They've told you that what you're going to produce at the end of your 3 years or 3+ years or something is what's called a thesis manuscript, or it's a thesis. So you're working towards a thesis. Whereas if you've already started interacting with your supervisors and you're pursuing a master's, which is taught and dissertation, they've told you, your supervisors have told you that what you're going to produce is a dissertation. Okay. Now these things are flipped over depending on where you went to school, right? The Americans especially will call things that are produced by people pursuing doctoral studies as dissertations, whereas if you're doing a master's thesis or something. But the idea behind a thesis, the difference between a master's and thesis is quite simple, right? When, incidentally, by the way, for a thesis at UNZA, it's not just PhD, right? It's PhD and master's by research. So the people that are pursuing a master's by research ideally work on what's called a thesis. And the expectation there is that you're generating completely new knowledge, right? In fact, one of the things they're going to look at, these examiners, the 3 people that are going to look at your work, is they're going to look at the novelty of the research that you're working on or something like that. Whereas with a dissertation, although there's usually this obsession, even at master's level, people are doing taught and dissertation to ask, what is so novel, what you did, but there's no expectation, right? Because you're in essence, what you come up with is a discourse, right? Discourse, ideally. Discourse, let's say discourse, something like that. Discourse, I don't know. Right? So it's a dissertation. It doesn't have to, you don't necessarily have got to demonstrate that there's something that is completely novel about what you did. So a couple of interesting things here. In fact, another way of thinking about this is from the perspective of what is expected of you, is it? And this cuts across, irrespective of whether you are at UNZA or anywhere else. If you're doing a thesis, the expectation is that you're expected to demonstrate. You're expected to demonstrate that you're capable of conducting what they call independent research, right? So in other words, there's very less hand-holding ideally. Okay, so whereas for a master's, right, the expectation is specialization. So you become a master at something. You become really good at this really niche area. Whereas at PhD, you notice a distinction here. At PhD, you're supposed to demonstrate that you're capable of conducting independent research. In other words, you can generate new knowledge. So a couple of interesting things here, but usually the other interesting thing is that depending on who you work with as part of your research, in some instances, by the time you're done with your master's, probably the person or the people you're working with are going to actually impart you with the knowledge necessary for you to generate new knowledge, if you will, although it's not really expected. So it's a couple of interesting things, and I'm hoping that as we are interacting together with Professor Piri, myself, Dr. Miranda, Dr. Lampi, Dr. Mkelevai, Dr. Mlima, and the other colleagues that are actively participating in teaching and learning at master's level, we'll be able to bring out a number of these things. The unfortunate thing about, and by the way, if you're doing a professional master's, didn't mention this, we haven't left you out, right? You do what's called a capstone, is it? It is research, but the extent towards which you're conducting research is, the scope of work is drastically reduced again. Okay. Yeah, so quite a bit that we're going to do here, but I was doing that just to I think to make it known out there that you may see certain people pop in, people that perhaps you haven't bumped into. They're probably PhDs or something like that. I guess if I can put it bluntly, something else I wanted to say before we start here, and I literally have forgotten. This is the reason why you use slides here, but I'm sure I will remember. But anyways, so my name's Alaiton Piri. Okay, I'm a senior lecturer in the Department of Computing and Informatics, and welcome to CSC 5019, which is tagged as research methodology. If you have access to program documents specific to quote unquote the program you're enrolled into, is likely that the course code may be slightly different, but the focus is the same, right? So for some programs, it may not necessarily be 5019, but what we've done in the portal in SIS is we've just made this a mandatory course ideal, because the things that are covered are exactly the same. Okay. Now, before we jump into the kind of introduction to the course, we look at Administrivia for those of us that are doing this for credits. I think this is me just speaking to you on behalf of the head of department. There's a lot that has been going on at the UNZA here. It's been wild here, especially as it relates to the sanitation challenges at the UNZA. You will probably be aware of the fact that the trigger was the death of one of the students, right? So a few weeks ago, a couple of months ago, an undergraduate student fell into this ditch that had been excavated by ZNS as they were working on improving the, I guess, the sanitation at UNZA. And so the president jumped in, and the scope of work was increased and all that. But anyway, the long and short of it is that there've been a lot of memos that have been flying around. It's not my fault, I'm not involved in any of this. I'm not a member of Senate, but this is me telling you that we are sincerely sorry about what is happening here, but hopefully things will stabilize. You'll have noticed from the most recent memo that instead of initiating examinations, for those of us that are going to be sitting for exams, instead of exams starting next week, apparently Senate came up with a resolution for these exams to start in the week of the 22nd. So exams start on the 22nd. And so what we were instructed to do, or what Senate resolved rather, was that teaching and learning continue, okay, online until we get to the examination period, after which we shall break off for a short while, for about 2 weeks. So those of us that are supposed to sit for exams aligned with Term 1 courses, we'll write the examinations, and then afterwards, in the week of, I believe it's 6th of July, we're going to resume in-person classes. I know there's a couple of other things that have happened. Like I was looking at the revised session dates. I was chatting to, well, we had a board of studies, not chatting to, but we had a board of studies meeting today. And I remember one of the questions I asked was the fact that, listen, the term 2, or the terms beginning last year have been compressed. Is it instead of the usual 15 weeks, we now have to teach in 12 weeks because the UNZA is wanting to align itself, or to align the session dates with the regional dates as well. So I raised the concern to say, stopping classes on the 14th here is just too soon here. But apparently, the session dates that were shared are a bit off here. So the Senate resolved that they would extend by an additional 2 weeks. So actually, last day of classes is probably going to be the 28th of August, somewhere there or something. Okay. So sorry about what is happening here, especially to those of you that have reached out to me as postgraduate coordinator to complain that one of the things you have to do, because most of you are working, is you have to take time off work, right? So, you take time off work and then you are told that exams are not taking place. Now, we sincerely apologize about that. Anyways, with that being said, just a bit of context here in terms of what we're doing, right? Research is everywhere. And I think a nice way of launching our discussion here is to remind us, launching today's lecture series is to remind us that if we look at the so-called research from the perspective of the UNZA, you begin to notice that it's a very, very serious thing. So serious that people at UNZA who are employed to teach, people like me, people like Professor Piri, people like Dr. Nyirenda, people like Mrs. Kawemba, for instance, are employed to, and this is part of our KPIs, we're employed to do a couple of key things. I think it's 4 key things: to teach, do research, do consultancy, and to do community engagement. And indeed, if you look at how I'm appraised as a member of staff, they take into account all of these different things. If you look at what sort of things they look at when I'm applying for promotion, they look at all of these different things. And I'm not really sure if I'm going to get a chance to talk about some of these things. Maybe to be Professor Piri will be teaching this part here, but to try and exemplify some of these things, I'll showcase what is a transparent process really. Beauty with places such as the UNZA is, I mean, you're dealing with an open book essentially, right? So if you look at the way that the promotions are done at the UNZA, you notice that they'll specify what sort of aspects they look at. Is it points, what you should have done or something? But I want to draw attention to something interesting here. If I copy paste here, in terms of progression, yeah, I can use myself. I'll use Professor Piri as an example here. Professor Piri is the only professor we have in the department. He's associate professor. What that means is that if you look at this here, what it means is that associate professor. What it means is that in terms of research, right? He over the years, by the time I was applying to be associate professor, I think it's like the 3rd year or something, maybe 2nd year that he's been associate professor, he accumulated points. But more importantly, they had to check to verify that this key metric to do with research called your H-index score was a minimum of 8. Okay, so if you look at somebody like Professor Piri, you notice that his H-index is off the roof here. It's like 23. I think he probably has reached the threshold for full professor, is it? If you look at this, right? For him to be promoted to professor, he needs to, maybe the only thing that is pending is these other requirements here. But in terms of the research part, he's way over the threshold here. So this goes to show you the importance that the UNZA places on research. Not only that, this thing called the H-index obviously it's an objective way of measuring one's impact when it comes to research. All you do is you're looking at what one has published and the perceived value of what one has published. And also think about what H-index is this 23 simply means that out of all the publications that Professor Piri has authored, and it's quite a number of them actually, if you look at his profile, a whole bunch of them, right? Out of all the publications, out of all of his publications, there are quite a number of them, 23 of them have at least 23 citations, if that makes sense. Now, I'll showcase, I'll demonstrate this metric by looking at a junior academic, I guess, somebody who doesn't really have as much of those things as Professor Piri. So if you look up Lighton's metrics here, you begin to notice that he's way behind here, right? H-index score of about 9 and stuff like that. Okay, so research is quite crucial. And if you look at what the UNZA looks at in terms of assigning points, because for Professor Piri to be promoted to associate professor, he had to accumulate these 750 points. For you to accumulate these points, you get points from teaching. I'm going to skip the teaching part here, right? But you also get points from research and publications. And the UNZA has a systematic way of assigning points insofar as research is concerned. So they look at academic events that you've attended. They look at peer-reviewed publications, types of publications. Is it a journal article? You know, is it a conference proceeding paper? Is it a book chapter? Is it a book or something like that? But anyway, the long and short of it is that it turns out that if you look at the UNZA as an organization, it takes this very seriously, right? It takes this very seriously, both at an individual level. So this cascades across, I don't know if people were aware here, especially for some of our colleagues that are doctoral students and work for other institutions. I saw one of my students, Gershom, I think he works for Kapasa University. He just started his doctoral studies this year. I've had the rare privilege of interacting with colleagues from Kapasa. In fact, I was working from there a few months ago, towards the end of January or something. It's not as large as the UNZA. It's a relatively new institution, right? The UNZA has, you may not believe this here, but the UNZA has 900 plus academic members of staff, right? An issue of poking around these members of staff is, if you go to Google Scholar, for instance, not everybody has a Google Scholar profile at the UNZA, but that's neither here nor there. But we have quite a few that have profiles. So if you go to Google Scholar and you start looking at profiles of members of staff at the UNZA, you notice that it's quite a number of them. And incidentally, what Google Scholar does is it actually arranges faculty staff, right, in descending order of those with the highest citations. Some of these may be very common name for you, right? Like Professor Sepo, I think, was Vice Chancellor when I was an undergraduate student myself a very long time ago. I was an undergrad between 2003 all the way up to 2007. Somewhere in between that period was when he was EC or something. So at your own time, you probably may want to poke around here to appreciate, you know, the seriousness that the UNZA places on research, in other words. So in essence, all the 900 plus, right, lecturers, we call them lecturers, are expected to do research at the UNZA. There are a lot of them, okay? You'll find them here if you're interested in poking around here. So the UNZA really looks at, we can look at research here from the perspective of UNZA as a whole, you know, as an institution, just how much value it places on research. We have the whole directorate, right? An entity that reports to a vice chancellor called the Directorate of Research and Development. It was previously called the Directorate of Research and Graduate Studies, but things are evolving rather quickly at the UNZA. So there's a director there. There's a whole team, assistant director, is a deputy director, and a few other individuals that actually assist the director to try and push this agenda of research at the UNZA. Serious things happening here. If you look at the amount of money that some of these professors are pulling into UNZA here, these are millions of dollars, right? Common names like Professor is it Joseph who here? And I want to use him as Joseph Zulu. I want to use him as an example because when I was in first year, I actually shared a room with him. I was squatting with somebody back at the time here. You know, so these people bring in millions of dollars, okay? Anyways, so research is important, right? Both at the individual level, but also at an institutional level. If you look at platforms, so it turns out we have a whole directorate that oversees anything to do with research, yes? And then this research is tied to individuals. But what the UNZA does, like any normal university, is they make available details about what sort of research is conducted at the UNZA by uploading, right? Scholarly research output, it's called, on a piece of software that is typically called an institutional repository, okay? So an institutional repository, and if you look at the UNZA, I'm just gonna try and see if I can get the direct link here. For the UNZA, there are two platforms ideally. We are migrating to what UNZA is calling an integrated research information management system, okay? So the IRIMIS, ideally. But previously, we had a platform, a dedicated repository. So go here. A dedicated repository, which is, it's still active. I think the systems are running in parallel. So the old IR, or I guess the other active IR is accessible on dspace.unza.zm. So if you go to dspace.unza.zm, you have a sense, dspace.unza.zm, you have a sense of what sort of research output the UNZA generates. And if I were you, at the very least, today, I would bookmark this and I would try as much as possible to, just going to zoom out. I'll try as much as possible to go to, so this repository is organized into high-level structures called communities. And one of the important communities that probably I would want you to spend time on is this thesis and dissertations. Thesis and dissertations community, right? A container structure ideally. Within here, you have collections corresponding to the different schools at the UNZA, okay? So in our case, I think we're interested in School of Natural Sciences. This should change to Natural and Applied Sciences. So in each of these collections, you have, in essence, manuscripts, right? So theses and dissertations that have been authored by students that have graduated from the School of Natural and Applied Sciences. So since the UNZA opened its gate, ideally, or since the UNZA graduated its first cohort of, is it master students or something, the School of Natural Sciences has graduated to date a little over 419. I'm saying a little over because recently people graduated. However, you will notice here that if we look at this 419, the most recent date, publication date is probably 2025, ideally. So dissertations for individuals that graduated a few weeks ago, last month it was, have yet to be uploaded on the UNZA repository, right? So quite a number of interesting things. The unfortunate thing here is you'd have to put in a little bit of effort to extract or search on publications that are specific to our department, because this collection, the Natural Sciences collection, comprises of manuscripts produced by, students that graduated from, Department of, is it chemistry or something? Biological Sciences, I know we've rebranded here, I'm butchering some of these, Maths department and all those things, right? So quite a lot of importance placed on research at the UNZA. Now I was saying that the repository is running in parallel with this new platform that the UNZA is setting up. And there's a method to the madness here. There's a reason why I'm talking about some of these platforms. If you look at what UNZA is calling the IRIMIS platform, it's meant to be this integrated portal or platform that is meant to not just showcase publications or scholarly research output generated at the UNZA, but also showcase the different types of long-term projects that faculty, staff, and students are working on, and there are a number of such projects, okay? If you look at, I'm going to call them more progressive schools like VET, for instance, they attract millions of dollars. They have large-scale projects going on here, projects that have resulted in infrastructure development, for instance. I think they've built like new lecture theaters and all those things, right? But in addition, the idea behind this IRIMIS platform, what UNZA calls the IRIMIS platform, is it's supposed to collect information as it relates to research, okay? So in addition to this repository platform or something, the UNZA also has these fragmented platforms like the journal platform. And the idea of the IRIMIS is it's meant to pull information from the journal platform. And if we do set up a conference management platform or something, we pull information from there as well, okay? Currently, I don't think we've gotten to a stage where we are actually harvesting or integrating the IRIMIS with all the journals, because the only journal that is there is the JABS journal. But the UNZA has a total of 16, right? Journals that are affiliated with the university. All of these have different focus areas. Typically, they're tied to specific disciplines as they relate to the UNZA. So for instance, some of them have their history rooted in postgraduate training. Like for instance, journals such as the Journal of Agriculture and Biomedical Sciences, Journal of Law and Social Sciences, and the Journal of Natural and Applied Sciences. These were created to enable postgraduate students to be able to graduate, because one of the requirements, I believe, especially for doctoral students, is that you're supposed to publish, right? You're supposed to publish your research in a journal, a peer-reviewed journal, ideally. But I'm sure we'll have a discussion about this. I don't know if it's going to be with me or with Professor Piri when the time comes, ideally. I'm just talking about these things, waffling around to try and remember we're having a discussion that is centered around research, right? Just how important or the value that the UNZA places on research. So as a whole, UNZA places value in this, but also, it becomes interesting for us to appreciate what actually is going on the global scene, right? Especially as it relates to, let's say, computing-oriented fields, because this is what we are doing. This is what we are all doing here. It turns out that people are doing a lot of amazing things, right? And for you to appreciate just how much is going on out there, I want to double back here, right? And use Professor Piri's Google Scholar profile, because he's quite diligent in terms of curating his publications, right? If we look at Professor Piri's profile, his profile alone, what you begin to notice, right, is that, and we order these not by citation count, but we order them by publication year. Begin to notice that in any given year, right, Professor Piri co-authors a series of publications. And by the way, this is fairly common for a renowned academic like Professor Piri to publish a lot of things in a given year. Why? Well, because, and if you look at 2025 alone, there's a lot here, a whole bunch of stuff here. If you look at 2025 alone, right, Professor Piri authored, I don't even want to sit here and start counting here. We're not here to count publications, but quite a bit of stuff, right? But here's the thing, right? If you look at the list of authors, what you begin to notice is that his name in most of these publications is at the end, okay? At the end, at the end, at the end, right? At the end, at the end. And it turns out that in academia, especially in computing, different disciplines do these things differently. When you're an academic and you author things, if your name is at the end, you are considered to have been the lead person, ideally, right? A lead person. In other words, more or less like the PI or something, one who drives the overall agenda. That's the one thing. The other reason why you see Professor Piri having a whole range of quote-unquote publications in a given year here is because he supervises a lot of postgraduate students. So for most of these publications, these individuals who are first authors here, these are in all likelihood students. Like Dr. Chiwawe recently graduated. Is one of well, he was one of our PhD students. He's graduated now. I guess he was graduating a few weeks ago, right? So he was being supervised by Professor Piri. Now again, these issues to do with because academia, unfortunately, if you're not, again, I'm saying unfortunately here because you may not like this, it's all about rituals, right? There are these rituals that you've got to appreciate, especially if you have aspirations to work in this space, or if you're already working in this space, if you teach like me for a living. There are these rituals that you have got to follow by the T. And even if you're not going to work as an academic like me, but it turns out that some of these things that you're expected to do between now and the time when you graduate, they have so many different rituals, right? You do things systematically. The way you write, for instance, the way you structure research, and all those things. Right, so it's important that you get an appreciation of all of those things. Anyways, so I was using Professor Piri as an example to say, if you look at just an individual academic, right, like Professor Piri, right, tens and tens of publications in any given year. If we were to look up his details, I guess from the perspective of, I don't know if we have number of publications is horrible, designed by Google Scholar here. I don't know if there were HCI experts that looked into this. I have to use this infinite scroller here to trace Professor Piri's background here. If you notice, since Professor Piri started publishing, he's published a total of, at least for now, 261 things, right? Now, this is just one person. Remember I said the UNZA, right? The UNZA has 900 researchers who are expected to conduct research. Professor Piri alone has 261, right? This is one person. The UNZA has 900 lecturers. In fact, forget about the 900. In each department, or rather the UNZA also has postgraduate students. Postgraduate students are expected, during their stay at UNZA, they're expected to publish. If you're a doctoral student, you, at a bare minimum, you will publish, whether you like it or not, if you want to graduate. Sadly, sorry about that, but you're expected to publish a total of two, right? At least 2 peer-reviewed journal articles. So for the doctoral students in the house here, and this year we went full out here. We've actually recruited, we enrolled quite a number of doctoral students, right? We're expanding here. You begin to realize that there's a lot happening, right? So if we look at computing alone, right? Look at an individual researcher like Professor Piri. We zoom in and look at what is happening at institutional level. So people doing the same things as Professor Piri, people like Lighton, people like Dr. Nyirenda, people like Dr. Chibuye, right? People like Dr. Lampi and all those things. You begin to notice that at departmental level alone, there's a lot that is happening. If we scale up and we look at what is happening in these other departments, you begin to notice it's quite a bit that is happening, right? Again, we focus on computing and we look at the global scene. If you go to academic databases like the ECM Digital Library, for instance, then you have an appreciation of just how much is going on out there so far as research is concerned. Okay, so hopefully this gives us an idea of why this is important. And I know for some of us, you're probably sitting there and you're thinking, well, maybe I don't care, right? I don't care because, and it's okay if you don't care, because I want that master's, because I want to get promoted, for me to be director if you're working for the government or something like that. Yeah, chasing a promotion or something. But it turns out that there's a whole lot of research that goes on in these organizations. In fact, there may not necessarily be a lot of research that goes on insofar as computing is concerned, but there should be research going on. And you know, I'm speculating here. I guess I know also. There's a reason why colleagues, we've been grappling with a very simple thing here, right? Like spam calls, random calls we're getting. No, I sent money to your number. Can you resend it to me or something? This has been happening for years now. If we are truly conducting research in these private entities like Airtel and Zamtel, that problem would have been solved by now. But anyways, this is me saying that if you look at it from the perspective of Zambia here, research does not just apply to higher education institutions, but it also is supposed to apply to government ministries, departments, right? These private organizations. There are a lot of problems lying around. But anyways, so hopefully this gives us an idea of why, I guess, research is important, right? Now, now that we've kind of like done a very mini, I wouldn't call it an introduction here, but try to set the tone for what is going to be happening, for why what we are doing is important. I thought it would be important for us to zero in on the 4 different things that I would want to discuss as part of this lecture series. So first, for those of us that are doing this for credit, I'd want us to quickly appreciate how the course is structured relative to the grading and all those things. And then at some point, and I don't know if we should talk about the detailed postgraduate guidelines. Maybe we should. I think we'll focus on what is expected of you if you're a master's student, if you're a PhD student or a doctoral student. This introduction is supposed to be, I guess, towards the end here, because I just want to briefly talk about some of the key themes that we're going to cover here. I should mention this as well. I don't know if I'm gonna. I've created slides tied to my current thought here, but before I lose my train of thought, the world has changed. When I was a doctoral student here, when I first got into grad school, which was in 2010, 2011 or something like that, things were different. The world has changed now, right? You know, had to go into the library. You had to spend time understanding or learning how to search for literature on Google Scholar or something like that, right? In fact, if you look at the entire kind of research process related to the scientific method, because crucial to what everybody's doing here is science, right? You begin to notice here that things have changed. Previously, it used to be the case that this whole thing was so involving. For you to come up with an initial literature synthesis, for instance, you had to put in quite a bit of effort, a great deal of effort actually. Read and reread, read and reread. When you're collecting data and constructing your instruments, you have to spend time thinking about all this. But the order has changed, and in fact, I would want for us to be honest with ourselves, and at least for the part of the course that I'm going to lead, I would also want us to talk about what it is we can do to ethically use a whole range of tools, right, that we are seeing on the scene here. They're right there. We shouldn't really, sit there and pretend like they're not there, right? Otherwise, we now have a situation where we send this message to students, say, you're not allowed to use these tools here, but they're probably going to end up using the tools anyways here. So I want us to talk about those things because they're there. They're not going anywhere. And not too long ago, I was interacting with I'm just going to do this here. I was interacting with some students, and we're discussing bibliographic, management software tools. We're going to cruise through these because I want us to kind of share these ideas. And I discovered, because I hadn't used Mendeley for a very long time, I discovered that Mendeley is a reference management software tool, a bibliographic management software tool, is now integrated with a chatbot, right? So within Mendeley, previously when I was a student myself, literally I had to kind of read the entire document like this if I wanted to understand what this publication was all about here, right? The stuff I authored with some of the students I worked with. You had to kind of like read the entire thing here, but the world is changed, right? Boom, right? Boom, you just come here and you're using chatbots or something like that. But anyways, so I want us to talk about all of those things here. So we're going to talk about Administrivia, look at the guidelines, and then do a better introduction to revisit the so-called scientific process, right? We look at the stages of the scientific method so that you understand what it is we're going to discuss for my part of the lecture, for Professor Piri's part of the lecture, for Dr. Nyurenda's part of the lecture. And I'll even throw in some case example publications that I've co-authored myself. Okay? So in terms of introductions, again, I have to apologize to those of you I've taught before, because I always use more or less the same introduction, but I recognize that there are probably doctoral students that I've not introduced myself to. So details about myself. Ideally, the UNZA, there's been a lot of changes to the web platforms at the UNZA, but the UNZA has, if you go to the website, those of you that have actually bothered to go to the website, you notice that the UNZA has a staff portal. Yeah. Now, I don't know what our colleagues from CICT did here. Previously, this portal here was so comprehensive that it had details of all members of staff. In fact, I equally had a profile myself, but I don't have credentials anymore, so it's difficult like that here. It just died. My profile just died. I just have to follow up here. I had a profile here, but if you're looking for information about me as it relates to the UNZA, what you can do is you can actually take time and visit my research group website. So there's this informal grouping that I founded. We call this research group the Data Lab Research Group. It's not uncommon in a university setting for a lecturer to have a dedicated group, right? A focus area. And ideally, the students that you supervise will be affiliated or associated with that particular group. In my case, there are other members of staff or other people, external people and internal people that I've collaborated with, that are part of this research group. So if you're looking for details, comprehensive details about myself and what I've been up to besides my Google Scholar profile, you can go to a research group website. And on there, if you go under current members, you will find my profile right there. But also, you will find a not so complete profile of students that I currently supervise or co-supervise. So I'm going to share Data Lab research group. You'll find the details there. And maybe a few things about this notion of research groups, because it's tied to research ideally. And because some of you that are working in academia would want to replicate some of these things, right? So I'll use my student Gershom, for instance, Shala from Kapasa Makasa, right? Once you get to a stage where you students, the normal thing to do is, oh, sorry if you're offended, I'm using the word normal thing here, but I guess it is normal. Or the expected thing for you to do, or something you should think about doing here, it may not be an expectation, is you set up your own research group. And in fact, when I was a graduate student, I was part of a research group by a person that I worked with very closely for almost 8 years, right? So when I was doing my master's, he was my master supervisor. When I was doing my doctoral studies, he was my principal supervisor. I was also working with Professor Christoph Meino. If you look at his research group website, it's called the Digital Libraries Laboratory at the University of Cape Town. And you notice that he has a directory of students that he is currently supervising and students that he has supervised in the past. So probably one of the students' names, past students, is Lighton, who is right there, if this makes sense. So I was a student, a master student between this period and a PhD student between this period here. So this whole notion of a research group is quite expected. It's very, very normal, actually. Not all, faculty staff who set up a dedicated, kind of website, but in our case, we found that it becomes relatively easier to attract funding. Okay, so you're interacting with people and you tell them, well, the work that we've been doing is available on our research group website, and so it becomes a lot easier for them to appreciate what it is you do. Okay, so my details are available on my research group website. And I don't want to waste a lot of time here kind of talking about what it is I've done. If you're interested in my academic career, I see it as starting when I enrolled into grad school back in 2011. You'll find all these details on the Data Lab research group. Also, at your own time, you may be interested in, because there's a list of current members, but also a list of alumni as well, and all members that have been affiliated with a research group, quite a number of them, right? Initially, when I joined the UNZA, it was mostly undergraduate students doing capstone projects. But over the years, I've actually supervised masters. And as recently as, is it before last year, or is it last year, I started supervising doctoral students. In case you're wondering, well, why is it that you haven't graduated any PhDs and you only just started doing this? The reach I was talking about, right? If you look at the guidelines, you'll notice that appointments for you to be appointed principal supervisor, you are supposed to have a minimum qualification, right? At your own time, you want to read the guidelines here, which is why that is there, not that it matters here. Anyways, so, but again, when I'm interacting with people like this, it's only opportunity I get to blow my trumpet here, put myself on a pedestal. So I like to briefly talk about, to rant and rave about some of the wonderful things I think we've been doing in the Data Lab research group, and truly we've been doing a whole range of interesting things here. I'm going to just skim through these. I'm going to talk about this because maybe some of you may be interested in looking at the things we've been doing because they're aligned or related to what you're doing. Like Trevor, for instance, I don't know if Mr. Trevor is around here. He's looking at predicting student outcomes or something like that. The stuff we've done, my research group here. But anyway, so our focus area in our research group, my research group really is on 3 main subfields of computing. Okay. Now these go by different names depending on who you're talking to here, but not that it matters, right? So we focus our research on data mining. and emphasis is actually placed on techniques that make heavy use of AI and machine learning techniques ideally. So we do extensive research as it relates to data mining. But the thing here is that our focus here is on data mining, anything to do with data mining, right? And true to that, actually, I'll talk about some of the projects, especially the ones that we started working on this year, and maybe some of the interesting projects from previous years here. What else? Well, we also conduct research in digital libraries. Our focus, the field of digital libraries really focuses on, computing techniques idea or techniques that can be employed to facilitate the long-term preservation of data, right? So if you have data, right, generated less in 2026, how can you design effective systems that will guarantee that that information is going to be accessible 200 years from now or something like that, right? So look at architectural systems, user issues, because in the past, traditionally, I've also supervised students that were interested in information science and not really mainstream computer science. And so would focus on the user side of things. By user side of things here, if you're looking for a specific SEM category of the field here, it's what is typically referred to as human-computer interaction, right? I also have an interest, incidentally, my interest or my affinity for digital libraries stems from my focus area when I was doing my master's. I actually worked towards proposing or suggesting a way of architecting this sort of systems, right, using a very simplified architecture. My dissertation was titled Simple Digital Libraries. Anyway, and then the other, area that we focus on is technology-enhanced learning. So anything to do with educational technologies, right? Design of software tools that have the potential of making education more effective, if that makes sense, right? Improving learning outcomes and all those things. But also, we focus, in the recent past, we've gradually started focusing a bit more on a subfield of educational technologies, or perhaps of data mining, called educational data mining, right? So we are focusing on just extracting analytics as they relate to things or data that is generated in educational settings, if you will, if that makes sense. Before I talk about some of these kind of projects, right, because I'm going to use them for the part of the course that I'm going to be responsible for, I will latch on to publications from some of these sub-projects that we've been focusing on. But before I talk about these things that I have in my slides here, I want to blow my trumpet a little bit here by highlighting the fact that beginning this year especially, we've explicitly decided that we want to collaborate a bit more with industry. Okay, so this year is an experiment, and what we've done is we've actually collaborated with two entities. We've collaborated with the National Assembly of Zambia. And one of the things we're doing with the National Assembly of Zambia, and the thing when you're interacting with industry is for them to work with you, usually they'll prefer that they prescribe what it is you should work on. So they will tell you, this is a problem that you want you to work on. Okay? Depending on where you're coming from, that may be a bad thing, it may be a good thing. I think it's a good thing. Well, for me, it's not a very flexible way of doing things, because I'll tell you one thing. Having worked in the corporate world, between 2017 and 2010, I worked for Zen, Celtel, Airtel, whatever you want to call it, for about 4 years or something. I like it in academia, right? I like the fact that I have control over what it is I want to do. If you look at research, nobody forces me to do things, right? I decide. I set the stage. So if you look at the projects on our research group website, all of those things are not things that were prescribed or handed down to me. Of course, I mean, implicitly you may be forced, right? Because you're chasing after funding, you're responding to a call for funding or something like that. But you get the point here. So National Assembly of Zambia, specifically, we're collaborating with their IT department or something. They're interested in, they carved out two main projects. So we're working on an accessibility project where, if you've been following through, with the goings on at Parliament, you notice that there was a lot of chatter as it relates to proportional representation, is it? So this notion that one of the things they want is to make sure that people that are differently able, people that are not able-bodied, right, or differently able-bodied, like they're not like you and me here, they want them to be represented in Parliament. And so what Parliament is anticipating is that after August, they expect there to be at least a person who is going to have a hearing impairment. Okay. And so they're interested in a very, I will not call this a simple solution. It's not so simple, but I'll call it simple because there are known techniques that can be employed, right, to come up with a solution. So the idea is, what we did is we sat down and we've been brainstorming and we set out on implementing a two-way kind of platform, right? So a platform that is going to facilitate the generation of, to automatically to interpret, like come up with an automated way of signing using Zambian Sign Language, if that makes sense. If you pay particular attention on TV and perhaps in certain sessions in Parliament, there will be, typically there will be at the bottom right here, there will be a very small little kind of insert, right, of a video footage of somebody signing, is it? I don't know if you've seen those people here. What they're doing is they're signing in what's called Zambian Sign Language. Now, it turns out that's not really sustainable, right? It's expensive. You'd require to make sure that you hire a number of interpreters. I mean, Parliament has the money, I guess. Yes, we understand, but there's more to this problem. So what we're doing here is we're implementing a two-way solution, one that does conversion from, I'm going to call this audio, right, to audio to Zambian Sign Language. And before you say, oh, but if American Sign Language has solutions, what about Zambian? Turns out Zambian Sign Language is different, right? It's completely different. The glosses that you use to convert to Zambian Sign Language, the actual signing is completely different. So you're doing that, and then the reverse as well. So if you have an MP who has a hearing impairment, they're not going to be talking, right? They'll be signing. So, well, looking at Parliament is interested in a solution that does the opposite, right? Using input, the signs themselves, you're generating audio, okay? So it's a two-way thing. It's bi-directional. And also this is part of the, we see this as part of a much larger project. It's to do with, accessibility. I happen to have a sweet spot for accessibility. A very, very dear friend of mine is blind, actually, somebody I met when I was doing my PhD. I have a student, incidentally, Gershom, who is interested in doing this in an educational setting. So what we're doing here is part of a much bigger picture, right? Because you can only imagine the potential of this sort of solution. What you see on ZNBC here, you don't need to have somebody signing, right? If you can automate that process where you just have an avatar, you're literally removing that person in the loop, right? Now, I know what you're saying here. Oh, Lighton, but you're getting rid of people's jobs here. Yeah, well, I don't know about that, right? But okay, so there's this, right? There's accessibility, and then the other things that Parliament is interested in is we're building, this is purely software development, no research here, but we're building a BIOS, workflow processing system. We are leveraging machine learning to try and work on problems as they relate to order papers, duplication, and all these things. It's a pure deduplication issue. What else are we doing in terms of collaborating with industry? Well, we've collaborated with an entity called Hobbiton, Hobbiton Technologies. I don't know if people have heard of Hobbiton Technologies, but the person who is, I don't know if he's CTO or something, CEO, I don't know, I have to check. Wangala was actually a colleague when I was working for Airtel. So these guys do a lot of things, right? And I don't know if some of these are trade secrets here, but we are working on machine learning techniques that are supposed to improve workflows as it relates to insurance, for instance, right? So we're automating, right? So insurance-related issues, and then also credit scoring, right? So this notion that these days, yeah, I don't know how many of you have noticed this, but if you look at your typical kind of, I don't call this, if you look at your typical mobile service provider, is it? If you look at your, oh, this thing is quite fast here. I'm surprised here. It's quite fast. If you look at your typical, if you look at your typical mobile service provider, right? What they'll do is they'll have, I don't know if you've seen this, right? This feature here. They'll have this. And I've experimented with these, right? And I've discovered that they are stealing money. I'm going to use the word stealing here, exorbitant interest rates here. I don't know if you've seen what is for MTN, it's option 6 here, right? Where you have a whole range of services, entities that will lend money to people. Now, the question you should be asking yourself here is how do they, if Lighton wants to borrow money, right? How do they determine currently, Kasaka or something, I don't know, or Zfins, how do they determine whether Lighton should be given money, right? Progressive countries will have like some kind of credit score, if you will. So this is what we are doing with our colleagues from Hobbiton. Interesting stuff. I find it interesting here, the data sets that we have access to, and really just the opportunity to demonstrate to other organizations out there that there's value in collaborating with academia, ideally. But there's more, right? So in the recent past, as recent as back in, I believe that was 2023, I think, I don't know if 2023, 2024 or something, we initiated this sub-project. So on our research group website, you will find under the project menu item, you will find details of the different projects that we're working on, right? It's like sub-problems that we're interested in working on. Within these sub-problems, we have students working on a number of different topics, ideally. So what we did as part of the road safety project is we embarked on this project to try and see what it is we can do to contribute to coming up with solutions that have the potential to address issues to do with road safety, a whole range of accidents or something. One of the main things that has come out of here, and there's a report, a technical report, there's an in-press publication, but also there are demonstrations on my YouTube channel, is a portal detection system, ideally. Now, when you're reading the report here, you will sit there and you'll be talking to yourself and thinking, there's nothing new here. And it's true, right? The technical solution here is this notion that you can kind of like build some piece of software that does fancy things like detect, I don't know what that is here, detect potholes or something. There's nothing novel about that. Yes, we know, right? The interesting thing for us was the research part of things. And I hope I'm still online here because I can't, I don't know if I can see myself here. Do I have to rejoin here? I don't know if I'm still online.
You are online, sir.
Oh, I am online, yeah. If you go there, right, and I was doing a demonstration recently, and if you look at my demonstration, you notice, but what is so novel about that? If you understand the solution, and it may not be in the technical report, right, because we've expanded what it is we did, you begin to notice that the technical solution itself, right, there's really nothing new about doing this, but the end-to-end solution and the research problem, ideally, right, tied to this, is what makes this whole thing interesting in my opinion. But besides what we have here, right, where we built we built what, 2 models or something. So a model that kind of is a binary classifier, right? Pothole, not pothole, something. And then also, because this is a classic classification with localization, I'm trying to see where there are a lot of potholes, somewhere near Nevas Mumba's place here. It's a classification localization kind of problem here. So there's that, right? And then something else we are doing, I have 2 students here. So Chisomo is extending this by looking at other road defects. So if you look at your typical road, there are other problems besides potholes, rattling and all those things. So he's expanding on this. And then what Henry is doing is he's looking at not really the state of roads really, but what are called road controls. So signs and road markings, ideally, right? So anyways, a couple of things we're doing by way of research. We've also done research. This is odd stuff that we've now kind of like, we've paused on this. interesting when we're doing it the first time. We're looking at summarizing long documents, right? Legal and legislative documents, things like acts of parliament and stuff like that. But anyways, we've also done quite a bit by way of educational data mining with belt classifiers. We've analyzed, logs and stuff like that. I also have an interest in content contribution as it relates to Wikipedia, and I think gradually people are listening a bit more to us, I guess. We're like a broken record here when we're talking about Wikipedia. Oh, we should contribute to Wikipedia. There are a few, articles and pages on and about Zambian Wikipedia. But now that people like you and me understand the science behind how these large language models are implemented, right? These chatbots, like Gemini, for instance. The fact that the pre-training stage involves pulling information from the public web, right? Web crawl and all those things, those data sets, and Wikipedia, is it? And now, if they're pulling information from Wikipedia, then you begin to notice, if you say how many, right? If you say how many students and staff at the University of Zambia, you notice that this thing is going to, I want to call this hallucination really, but this thing is not going to be very accurate, right? The reason it's not going to be very accurate is because it is pulling, right? If you look at what they're telling you, this is all wrong here. It doesn't matter which sort of thing you're looking at here. And I guess this is slightly, it's doing more or less like the right thing here. I wanted to use an example of where it's pulling from Wikipedia here. How many support staff and teaching staff or something like that, and do this. I want to force it to undergraduate and postgraduate. I want to force it to pull information from somewhere here, from Wikipedia. If you notice, if you query this on a probably different chatbot, and it pulls information from I don't know if it's, there we go, this is what I wanted. If you notice, right? Well, the reason why it's telling you this number that everybody now is peddling, right? Even you, most of you are probably, when you're sampling and your target population is UNZA and you're sampling, you're going to claim there are 30,000 students, and there are 879 faculty staff. This is wrong, right? The reason you're going to do that is everybody's moving away from the web, right? Increasingly, we're becoming dependent on these chatbots, is it? But unfortunately, if you look at information as it relates to Zambia, it's stale, right? And I'll use the University of Zambia as an example. This is outdated information, is wrong information. And I know it's wrong, by the way, because I'm a Wikipedian myself, and the bulk of what you're seeing here, including these photos here, this is me, I think. I think this is me. If you check the owner here, right? This is me. If you notice, I'm a Wikipedian, so I know what's happening here. So this is wrong, right? But the long and short of it is that our obsession in Wikipedia, and there's quite a lot of interesting things we're doing here, is rooted in the fact that the world is evolving here. We're in the age of the machines, right? These chatbots that everybody's obsessing about work in a certain interesting way. They rely on data. If you ask them about information specific to Zambia, in most instances, this information is being pulled from public Facebook pages or something, right? Or it's putting information from places that either have insufficient information or they have old information. So anyway, so we have an interest to do with Wikipedia content contribution. We're not here to talk about what it is I'm doing, so I'm going to gloss over here. We've done quite a bit as it relates to online visibility of research output. I'll encourage you to go here. I've worked with a lot of students. A number of them have graduated. And a couple of interesting things that we are working on here. And then our landmark, I want to call this our landmark project, is the Enterprise Medical Imaging in Zambia project. I'm just going to share a link to the Enterprise Medical Imaging in Zambia project. If you go to emi.org.zm, you will find details of what it is we've been doing with colleagues from the university teaching hospitals, UTHS, right? Called EMI project. We've been working on anything and everything to do with medical images in Zambia. So the funding that we've attracted is interested in how AI can be used in these sort of settings. So you will notice that our focus for enterprise medical imaging is mostly on medical images, ideally, right? So quite a number of interesting things here. But enough about myself. There's a lot of us in the chat. I'll ask that I'm going to pause here for maybe a minute or so. I would love it if you could introduce yourselves, if we could all introduce ourselves, actually. Because what you'll notice is that very, very soon, once things stabilize at the UNZA, insofar as research is concerned in the department, we have a schedule. So we're going to share a schedule where we'll be inviting, students that are at an advanced stage, right? They're writing, they've done their research or something, so they can give seminars. And for the new students, very, very soon, you're going to be doing your quote unquote proposal presentations, if you will. So I'm kindly asking, see a lot of familiar faces here. I just saw a very dear friend here from the UNZA days here, Kasimona Schela. But if you can write your name, your program in this format. If you have a supervisor, indicate your supervisor. If you are enrolled into 1519 because you're doing you're doing this for credit, for supervisor, just say NA or something, so in the chat. And then your research interest. So if you are a doctoral student, you probably already have a topic, right? So you can write the topic. So I mean, what I mean here is you do something similar to what I'm going to showcase right now. I'll just copy paste this. So something akin to that. Usually what I'll typically do is we'll take turns if it was a much smaller group, introducing ourselves, you are mute and stuff, but we are a lot of us here. We'll spend the remainder of this thing, if we do that, introducing ourselves. We are 44 of us. So if you can just type in the chat like I have, greatly appreciate it. We'll greatly appreciate it. Yeah, so that we know each other, and I'm sure people will be paying particular attention to the chat, so that you kind of have a sense of that. But also maybe just to mention that one of the things we are doing is we are revamping the departmental website. So if you're a master's student or a PhD student, very, very soon we're going to be reaching out to you so that we send details about your about how you should log into your own private, web profile where you can update your details. We want to set up something similar to what people from is like here will do here, right? Where you have a dedicated kind of I don't know if they have a dedicated directory of all students, is it? It's usually important and it's expected. Usually you're supposed to have something like this. So we're going to be reaching out to you. But for now, we want to know each other, right? Because some of us are probably going to be working on problems that are kind of similar, if you will. Okay, so I see quite a number of people sharing details about themselves. Thank you very much. I see Trevor is in the house, which is good. And then at the same time, you can mix and mesh these things. Again, we are interested, especially those of us that are doing doctoral studies. If you did your master's already, no likelihood you have published. We would want to have a sense of what it is you've done. So if you're able to just write for all of us, actually, your name. So you have full name, full colon, your name, comma, number of publications you have so far. If you know H index, indicate your H index. Usually, if you have a Google Scholar profile, it's a lot easier to pull out this information. If you don't know, just say NA or something like that, right? And we don't expect everybody to actually have these details, but we know that quite a number of our doctoral students have published. Quite a number of our doctoral students work in academia, or they work in environments that place an emphasis on research, and so probably they've co-authored or they've authored some publications. So again, if you can type in the chat something akin to what we have here, we'll greatly appreciate it, right? So you're typing two things. You're in essence typing details about your name and who your supervisor is and stuff like that, and then you're also typing your name and publications if you have them, something akin to what you're seeing there. Okay, so quite a lot of interesting. I think at a later stage I'll do some analysis on this, and then I'll share the results so that people have a sense of the rate at which we are growing as a department. You probably will find it hard to believe here, but we've gone full out in terms of our expansion plans. We've only graduated, I think, a total of about 4 PhDs in the department, and the department has been around since the early 2000s, so for more than 2 decades, right? Of course, the argument that one would make here is that there are usually more opportunities in industry as opposed to academia, right? So if you look at the history of the department, people that have the potential to teach will not be interested in teaching, is it? Because there's less money in academia. I'd much rather work in industry for the banks and these telecommunications companies or these startups, right? Because you'll be making more money there, I guess. I don't know. Now, again, I'm not just cruise through the part to do with the admin. I'll share the slide deck because I want us to really focus our attention on what this course is all about, I think, right? The admin issues, not so important. You can read the slides at your own time, if you will. But I'm just going to draw attention here to the learning outcomes as they appear in the program document. I'm going to ask you politely to say, if you're one of those people who doesn't have access to the program document and you want a copy, have your course rep reach out to me. I'll share the program document for the course outline for this document. In essence, if you look at the document itself, this course called 5019, 5031, whatever, research methodology, has information, right, on and about what the expectation should be so far as students are concerned here. But I wanted to start off by saying that it's of benefit to almost all of us that are logged on, because in all likelihood, if you're enrolled into our Master of Computing in Data Science, next year, right, in year 2, you are going to have to enroll into a core course, which is a capstone, okay? I don't remember the course code here, but it's a capstone, ideally. If you are enrolled into a taught and dissertation master's, you are in all likelihood enrolled into 5019, which is this course. If you are pursuing, whether you are pursuing a taught and dissertation master's or a master's by research, or you're a doctoral student, you will enroll into either 6,000. So for those that are doing master's degrees, you are going to enroll into CSC 6,000. So if this is year 1, next year you will enroll into 6,000. If there are people that are in year 2 or year 3, you're already enrolled into CSC 6,000. If you're a doctoral student, you're doing a PhD by research, obviously, you are most likely enrolled into CSC 7,000. Okay? Again, if you're a data science student, you're going to enroll into CSC 6004. Now, all of these courses require that you understand what research is all about. Okay? And I mean, if I were to ask you what research is, you probably know what research is all about, right? But it turns out that it's slightly more complex than that. Well, maybe it's not complex, but it's more involving. And in fact, I'll retract that as well. It used to be more involving, right? This is the age of the machines here. Things have become so simple, which is why I'm really keen for us to share ideas on how we can be more efficient and effective by ethically using certain types of AI tools, if you will. I'm really keen on us having that conversation. I'm especially keen that I think when we sat down and we did an audit of the topics, I think the consensus was that I was going to go all the way up to literature review. So I will demonstrate how you can, use certain types of tools, especially as it relates to literature review, but also brainstorming ideas, I guess. I don't know. But Professor P will probably take you through what it is you can do to analyze data through the ethical use of these AI-inspired tools, these Gen AI tools or something. But anyway, so this course, 5019, is ideally aimed at equipping students with the skills and knowledge that they'll require for them to execute a thesis, a dissertation, or a capstone project. Okay, and usually this is an end-to-end process that begins with ideation, is it? You identify a problem. I mentioned rituals here. You ideally have got to be systematic in the way that you are carving out that problem. So you outline the problem statement, main objective, specific objective, research questions, the whole 9 yard, right? Yeah, so there's that, and then you get to a stage where you do your literature review. If you're a doctoral student, more likely your supervisor will insist that you write what's called a review paper, so that you understand the space itself, right? So you do a whole bunch of reading, a lot of reading actually, and writing, and then you initiate experimentation, right? So you design your experiments tied to whatever specific objectives you have. And when you're designing an experiment, there's a lot that goes into there, right? The research design, the time horizons, the measurement instruments, the sampling techniques, the sample sizes you're going to leverage, theoretical underpinnings or theoretical frameworks that are aligned with what you're doing and all those things. And afterwards, you do your data collection, and then you analyze the data, right? Inferential statistics, descriptive statistics, thematic analysis, if you're looking at analyzing interview data and all those things. It takes a while, really. It turns out that for you to get to a stage where you know exactly what to do, you need to understand the theoretical underpinnings of what research is all about. In fact, for you to be effective at using all of these AI-inspired tools that people are using now, you want to understand the end-to-end process. And then you have interpretation of data, and then you write up and all those things. And in fact, writing up doesn't end there, is it? If you're a doctoral student, I mentioned that, and we'll talk about this, I guess, but I mentioned that one of the things that the UNZA expects of you is you're supposed to publish in at least two peer-reviewed journal articles, right? Now the journal has got to have an impact factor of at least 1. So one of the things that your supervisors are probably going to tell you is, well, looking at what we're writing about, go and find an appropriate venue. Some instances they may suggest a publication venue, right? It takes a while before you can kind of figure things out here. Anyways, so it's quite the process. The thing is, at least insofar as you getting that qualification is concerned, it's about understanding the rituals related to academia, if that makes sense. So, yeah, and in terms of what you will find in this program document, you notice that this is verbatim text, right? Provide you a bit of context about the course itself. But what's important, what I want to draw attention to here is that ultimately, by the time we get to August 28th, apparently, whether you are revising research, whether you are doing this for the first time, we never had a dedicated research methods course when I was doing my capstone in 2006/2007 here. And I imagine that's the case for most of you. If you're doing your master's, at bachelor's probably didn't have a dedicated research methods course. So what you should be looking forward to, if you have, this should be like review. We're going to learn together how exactly we frame or phrase problem statements. Maybe we can go a step further and we'll look at various ways of identifying problems, because research begins from identification of problems, is it? And usually if you look at the scientific method, it all starts with an observation. I've made an observation. Sanitation at UNZA is extremely bad. Okay? So using that observation, I'm going to carve out a problem. I'm going to study students and lecturers' perceptions on sanitation challenges, on the state of sanitation at UNS or something. Right? That's a problem. Of course, I mean, be phrased in a very nice manner, right? Logical manner or something. They use, context and the actual problem and stuff like that, right? And then from there, you carve out your main objective. And then for your main objective, your specific objectives. And it's using your specific objectives that you come up with what's called a hypothesis, if it's one. It's an educated guess, ideally, or a set of hypotheses, if there are a number of them. Okay? And so we're going to learn how to create these hypotheses. In addition, we are going to learn how to create research questions. And of course, in the process, specific objectives. Also, one of the key learning outcomes is for you to critically review literature, to learn how to critically review literature on a selected area of research interest in computing. So if you're like Gershom and your interest is in sign language, right? Automated sign language interpretation in educational settings, boom. The question here is, what sort of literature are you going to be reading, right? So we'll look at how exactly we identify related literature, right? How we conduct a literature review. And this is an integral part of the research process because, like it or not, right? Most of the things that you identify as problems or as potential problems have probably already been thought about by other people. In fact, they were probably thought about years ago. Okay? So there's nothing new. I mean, there's certain things that are new, right? Like, how do we efficiently, or who is out there in space? We don't know, right? These are unknown problems. Who is this? Or Secretary of State from the US? They say there are things that we know, is it? Things that we know, we don't know. Things that we don't know, we know. And things that we don't know, we don't know, or something like that, right? And research is like that, right? Because crucial to research is this notion that you want to generate new knowledge, ideally, right? You can generate new knowledge in so many different ways. But before you can demonstrate that you've generated new knowledge, you have got to demonstrate to people that you've looked at what other people have done. And so this literature review really involves a lot of things, is it? Searching for literature. It's an art. Well, okay, things have changed, right? You can do deep research now, right? You don't have to. Nobody does this anymore, I guess. I don't know. But I think I could do it also. Nobody does this anymore, right? But we're encouraging our students to do this. We're expected to do this, actually. We do this already, but we're gradually evolving here. Gone are the days where we're saying sanitation challenges in higher education institutions, right? Right? So searching for content here, typo. Searching for, I know what that is about here, but searching for research here is an art, right? Because usually if you're searching for content in an academic database like this, there's no way you're going to read all of these 727,000 results, right? So yeah, we want to look at the traditional ways of doing things, right? How you filter information, I'm just looking at sanitation challenges as it relates to Zambia, Zambia or academic institutions in Zambia or something, so that you reduce the number of things you're reading, is it? You're outlining the selection/exclusion criteria ideally. So there's a rich research part, in other words, what we're going to discuss. A whole range of things here. How do you write a literature review? How do you cite? How do you reference? Of course, we're not citing reference, but we understand this. Some of the things here, especially for doctoral students, they may seem trivial. I remember you're auditing this course, and you're auditing a course where there are students or colleagues that are enrolled that probably have no knowledge about these things. So you have to bear with us who, in some instances, take, I think, what the white man calls baby steps here. But also, how we use quantitative and qualitative methods, to answer research questions. So your so-called thematic analysis, inferential statistics. When do I use a chi-square test or things like t-test or something, student t-test, right? When do I use those inferential statistics? ANOVA test and all those things. In what instances do I use descriptive statistics? what sort of measurement instruments are there, right? How do you collect data? It's not just questionnaires, interviews, workshops, document analysis and all those things, observations. And then at some point, you learn exactly how to design and implement a research proposal. And this is actually quite important, especially for people that are doing this for credit, because one of the outcomes for this course is a deliverable that is going to feed into CSC 6000. So from past experience, we have learned that it's better we force you to develop this proposal in year one, so that when we transition into year number 2, you're just refining the proposal that you'd have developed as part of 5019. If you're a doctoral student and you only have a concept note, the discussions we're going to have in here are going to enable you to have more productive conversations with your supervisors. Okay, again, doctoral students have 2 or more supervisors. Master's students can have 1 or more. Typically, it's 1 supervisor. Okay. Anyway, so again, and I'm not going to be around when we start looking at things like quantitative research methods and stuff. I think I'm going to end up to literature review. At least this is what we've agreed with Professor Piri or something. Anyway, so you're going to be interacting with my other colleagues here when you start looking at statistical methods, and it's nothing difficult really, I guess. I don't know, but maybe just learning how to, and I don't know if you get to cover this, right? The obsession at UNZA is always SPSS. Even when I was a student, it was an in thing. If you knew how to use SPSS, all the people from humanities would come to you here. But hopefully, if it's Dr. Nyirenda or Professor Piro is going to walk you through this, probably introduce you to tools that won't require you to pay money, is it? Or to hack software, like R, for instance. I make extensive use of the R programming language, right? So you can use R to do more or less what SPSS does. Anyways, and then there's supposed to be a learning outcome that is tied to how you present findings. Findings, again, it's a ritual in academia. When you're presenting your findings, they're done in a certain specific way, from how you write, how you present ideas if you're attending a conference, for instance, right? How you put together a poster if you're participating in an event where there's a poster session, if you will. So anyway, so this is the key learning outcomes. And you may not notice here, but all of these learning outcomes are aligned with what would typically be called, our interest here is the science, right? The scientific method or something. And your typical scientific method has a set of predefined tests. There's a lot of slope on the internet here. I was mostly looking for something on the web or some, on Wikipedia. Usually the things you have there are not AI generated images. Something like this is better. I think is better or something. So if you think about it, right, all of these learning outcomes, you may not really kind of appreciate this, but all of these learning outcomes are tied to the scientific method. And in fact, 5019 really is all about understanding what it is we do in all of these stages. Everything starts with a question, right? You research your topics, it's a literature review. You hypothesize. You test with experimentation. This is about research design, right, and experimentation. You analyze your data. Oh, there's a bit of data collection here and stuff like that. And then you report, right? You interpret, and then you write the thing. So all of these things that are outlined here as learning outcomes can actually be mapped onto the stages, the key stages of the scientific method, this thing here. Okay. And then in terms of the structure, now you will notice that there will be variations in the way that I'm going to handle my part of the course, and how Professor Piri and Dr. Nyirenda and my other colleagues are going to handle their part of this course, right? But what you should expect between now and when we finalize our discussion on literature review is where we should expect people to come through and give some talks. And specifically, I'm probably going to extend an invitation maybe to members of staff or students that have recently graduated or current students that are probably busy writing, so that we learn from what others have done. You should expect me to force you to read certain things, and I'll have to apologize because I again use an opportunity to teach courses like this to force people to read the research that I have co-authored. Apologies for that. And then I thought it would be interesting, right? This is 2026. It would be interesting for us to discuss tools, right? 21st century tools, especially these Gen AI-centric tools that can be used to make us more efficient and effective when it comes to literature review. You know, so it's all about tooling here. So I'll probably talk about some tools that I've experimented with, because I've done guest lectures where I've been invited to talk about how AI can be used as part of the scientific process or the research process. And I would love for us to have a conversation about that. Granted, I know most of us will probably be already aware of some of these tools, right? You know, Mendeley, Elicit, Notebook LM, and all these tools here. Anyway, so something else you should expect in terms of what we'll be including in these 3-hour-long interactions we're going to be having here is there'll be like a formal lecture, something similar to what we're having right now. So because 3 hours is a long time, what I've found to be helpful is a session like this would be segmented into parts. This may not start next week, but maybe after next week or something. There'll be a part where we'll probably look at, you know, how we can use certain tools. We invite somebody to give a short talk, just 15 minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes. You know, we discuss a paper, we highlight some of the key issues, relevant issues, especially when we're discussing literature review. Maybe I'll draw attention to a case, you know, study publication, and then we look at the thematic areas in the literature review section and all those things here. Anyway, so there's that, right? Now, this is a bit outdated, but I'll draw attention to a document I've already shared. I think all of us have access to these revised session dates. They're the ones that should substitute what we have here as part of part 2, ideally. All right, so again, I'm just regurgitating the things I've just mentioned in terms of the structure here. Because this course has people from most of our programs that are doing this for credit. I think 6 out of the 7 programs we have this as a mandatory course. So we have to stick to this schedule, unfortunately. We'll be interacting, unless if we shift things around at a later stage. But going forward, our classes for 5019 research methodology is going to be on Thursdays between 17:30 and 20:30. I know it's a long time here, 3 hours, but we'll try as much as possible to record, right? I think we are recording here so that we can have colleagues that will not be available kind of play back, if you do those things, yeah, play back the recorded interactions. So Thursdays, 17:30 to 20:30. This course, the course materials ideally are going to be shared either on Google Classroom or Moodle, but it's likely going to be a Google Classroom site. A link will be shared with you very, very soon, within the course of this week, I believe. If not, then early next week. Just make sure you enroll into the course so that even if you're auditing the course, you actually have access to materials, links, and all those things. I will dump the postgraduate guidelines, case study publications we'll be using, links to important resources there, right? So you probably want to make sure that you know into that. What I normally do is I try as much as possible whenever we have a lecture like this. Once it's recorded, I process it, and then I dump it on my YouTube channel. So in the event that you want to refer to, this is for my part of the lecture. In the event that you want to refer to the lectures, when you go to my channel, I'll share these on the Google Classroom site. Just go to the courses tab here, and amongst these courses, you'll find research methods, not the undergraduate one, but there will be 5019 ideally. So I'll be dumping the videos there in case you want to refer to them. I try as much as possible. It's a bit of additional weight, but I try to be on time. So when we have a class, usually there'll be a 1 day lag or something. So by tomorrow, this should be there or something. Now, the issue of books, right? Now, we are all people that are familiar with the internet or the web or something. So finding materials shouldn't really be a problem. You know, but whenever you have a rigid, this plays into the ritual here. You have to go by the book, is it? Somewhere in this program document, yeah, they're telling us that they are prescribed books, okay? And they are recommended books, recommended readings and prescribed readings, is it? Now, I'll be honest with you, for the part of the part of the course that I am going to be leading my colleagues in, what I do is I keep an open mind here. I have my own sources, so I may not necessarily use some of these readings here. And in fact, to be honest, if you look at the prescribed readings, the things that I have used, like explicitly, and things that I would actually encourage you to make sure you probably download and you put somewhere. This is a classic, right? Especially when you're getting started. The craft of research. I always recommend this to students that I work with, but also when I'm teaching a course like this. These other prescribed readings I have not come across. I saw them for the first time when I was going through this program document, to be honest. But you know, knowledge is knowledge, right? I would like to encourage you. There's a reason why people that came up with, I never played a part in coming up with this program document, but people that came up with the program document have a reason why they are recommending that this be a prescribed reading, and this, right? So at your own time, this will be shared with you. You probably want to poke around and see if you can find a copy of these different books here. In case you're thinking, well, I don't know what people think about here, your philosophies as it relates to stealing and unethical behavior. I don't think I'm the one who is going to have a conversation with you about ethics in research here, right? But I want to throw something at you here. I don't know if you consider it unethical for you to go and download illegal books or something, but because when I've taught research methods courses here, we talk about this as part of the ethics, right? And I always ask, if you go to platforms like LibGen, for instance, is it unethical for you to go and get a copy of the book there? Right? This is like pirating, right? Is this stealing? Is getting a copy of something stealing? I don't know. I mean, if you get my car, if somebody steals my car from outside here, I don't know who would want to steal my Corolla here. It's almost 10 years old here, other than that. But if you were to steal it, right, that is stealing here because I won't have access to it. But if you get a copy, is this stealing? Would you consider this fair use? I don't know, right? But also tools like Sci-Hub, right? If you're looking for peer-reviewed material, you know how some peer-reviewed materials, I'm sure you've seen this, is it? You go to a place like Google Scholar or something like this, and then you are looking at what Lighton has done or something. You want to read up on what Lighton has done, and you realize, wait a minute, this maybe not this here, thought. This publication, which was done as part of his doctoral studies here, is paywalled, right? I cannot get a copy unless if I pay money, right? Cash money or something, insane amounts, $25, $30 or something. Hello, I mean, who is going to pay that much money, right? To download. If you look at this, it's insane, is it? It just doesn't make sense here. Personal, I guess. I mean, who would want to pay, even if you were really obsessed to see what sort of research Lighton did as part of his doctoral studies here? I bet you wouldn't even consider paying at $1.50. And by the way, colleagues, I'm trying to literally check isn't today's rate here, what at 150 is here. This is 533 kwacha 16 ingwe, right? Current rate. Now, I was like, who would want to do this just to read the single paper, right? Well, I'm here to tell you that you know, this machine called the UNZA here is quite interesting. Interesting in the fact that, for one, UNZA has been in existence for a very long time, and from the outside looking in, you may think things are in disarray, but this machine works flawlessly, right? It's like a well-oiled machine, actually. So what the UNZA does, right, is they subscribe to what are called academic databases. So most of these things that are going to be paywalled, this is me telling you, and I think maybe we'll discuss this as part of literature review, but this is me telling you to say, if you go to the library side of things here, you have access to, not open access thing here, but we have access to e-resources. So academic databases that the UNZA pays money to, and you have access to for free. Right? So most of these things that are paywalled, you actually have access to. Things that you will find on Taylor and Francis, for instance. Things that you will find, well, Doge here is obvious open source, right? Open access. Diamond, open access, not Diamond, but most of the things are open access. So you'll notice that if Springer Nature, right, has a number of things that you only access when you have money or something. This is me telling you that you can actually get access to most of these things legally, right? So something else you may be interested in knowing is that amount you see when you're paying fees, even if you're funded, is usually a breakdown of why you are paying X amount, right? There will be, I think, what they call a library fee. It has nothing to do with actual building the library itself of books. People don't go there to read things in there anymore. I don't think so, right? Nobody does that. I don't know who would do that. Or maybe they're there, I don't know. I don't know who would want to say, I want to go to, I don't know if it's deck 13 or whatever, I don't know what deck here, to go and look for a particular book. Nobody does that here. But you still pay library fees because the UNZA subscribes, they pay money, a lot of money actually. Publishing is big business. So anyway, most of these things that are quote unquote paywalled can actually be accessed via your UNZA assigned email address. So these are the prescribed books, and then there's a list of quote unquote recommended books as well. And I'm actually surprised that there are some books that I would actually highly recommend that are not here. Maybe especially Cresswell. I don't know if Cresswell is there. Wow, I'm shocked. But anyways, so according to the program document, these are the prescribed and recommended texts. But what I've done in this slide deck is I've included things that I feel are going to be of use to you as you're interacting with me when I'm covering the topics that I'm going to cover. Okay? Now, some of them, you probably even find them useful when you're doing this with Professor Piri, for instance. Like this. This is to do with research design, right? Experimental design. You probably want to download this. It's a classic, right? Cresswell and Cresswell. I'm sure you've heard of it. The craft of research, of course. You know, because we are doing computing-centric programs, because we're working on problems, or because we're going to work on problems that require or that emphasize the use of computing artifacts, I would highly recommend experimental software engineering, especially if your proposed, if you're a doctoral student, your proposed research involves building of an artifact or something that you want to evaluate. This you must read, or this you must probably go and look at here. For some of you, especially if you're implementing like novel algorithms or something, you may not find this useful. If you're working towards coming up with a framework, I don't know if it's going to be useful, but I don't know. And in terms of tools, software tools, I included these because I suspect Professor Piri may refer to these when you're discussing data analysis. Okay, so tools like R, right, for inferential statistics and distributed statistics, in vivo for when you're analyzing, I guess, qualitative data, so things like interviews, interview transcripts, more to put. But I don't know, right? But what I want to do here is I want to throw in something here. I'm going to throw in some AI tools that I would want us to look at, especially as it relates to conducting a literature review. They're there. We may as well just have a discussion about how we can use them, and maybe also preempt the conversation you're going to have with, I don't know if it's Professor Piri, to do with ethics, is it? How can we ethically use some of those tools? The thing about ethical use of AI is this is a moving target. It's something that is new. It's so new that if you look at the guidelines for the UNZA, nowhere in here do these postgraduate guidelines talk about anything to do with ethical use of AI. It's still work in progress. Okay, but however, we can look at what I guess people that have been doing research feel, not what they're prescribing. So I will share my thoughts about how I feel about this space, and also we can look at what other people are doing out there. You know, so maybe universities or publication platforms that have come up with, especially generative AI policies. Ideally, you'll notice that we've made some progress at the UNZA. I must mention this, as it relates to generative AI is to do with publishing of journals, right? So if you go to the JABS journal, you notice that one of these policies we have here is a policy on ethical use of generative AI. Central to this is acknowledging, right, the use of AI, if you will. Anyways, so there's that, I suppose, I don't know. And then for those of us that are doing this for grading, I may be misrepresenting some of these things, but Professor Piri will clarify. I'm yet to have a comprehensive discussion or conversation with him regarding how the assessment is done. But at the very least, if you look at the parts of the thing I'm going to cover, please pay particular attention to this, right? Let's make sure that we learn exactly how we develop a proposal. It's rough here. You can fail the proposal, as in fail such that the entire process is going to be delayed. Yeah, you must think here, and sometimes it's important to talk about these things, colleagues. Excuse me. It's important to talk about these things, colleagues, because if you are, here's the thing here. If you are we'll start with, we'll focus on what we are doing, right? If you're a doctoral student, this is expectation, is it? As far as we are concerned, nobody in our department is doing their PhD part-time. I mean, as an individual, maybe you consider school to be part-time, but as far as you are concerned, you're doing this PhD on a full-time basis. Okay? If you are doing this with IDE, it will be part-time, and so they would consider that you do this PhD within minimum of 4 years, but maybe all the way up to 7 years. But as far as we are concerned, we're expecting most of you to finish, and it's possible to finish what you're doing in the next 3 years, right? In the next 3 years here. If you are a, I'm looking for structure for a master's here. If you are a master's student, 2 years, I guess, you'll find these details in here. But the long and short of it here is that we want to pay particular attention to the things we're going to discuss insofar as your research proposal is concerned, because at the very least, what we're going to discuss is going to immediately be of value to you as you are refining your proposal. If you're in year 1 of your PhD, if you're in year 1 of your master's, if you're in year 2 or more of your master's or your PhD, obviously the conversations we're going to have are going to be of use to you as you're executing your research. What we are trying to avoid is this. We are trying to avoid this. I don't know if I'm going to find if you're a master's student, we strive in an ideal case. We would love it if you're a master's student, would love it if you passed with no corrections, right? This rarely happens in our department. In the 9 years I've been with UNZA, I have never heard of anybody passing without any corrections. It is possible. There are people that are gifted like that. Sometimes it happens that you pass with minor corrections, or this is more common for us, you're passing with moderate corrections. Now, what we avoid, if you pass with without corrections, minor corrections, and moderate corrections, assuming your defense is done, let's say somewhere around January, which is usually the case, January, February, somewhere there, you will definitely graduate by May, right? But we always try to ensure that our students do not go through this, right? Usually if there are fundamental flaws in your methodology, yeah, in the way that you've cast your problem, things just don't make sense, they will tell you resubmit. They give you 6 months, you resubmit. And what that means is if it's a resubmission, you can't graduate in that current year, you probably graduate in the following year or something. I mean, you can say resubmit in less than 6 months, but that's neither here nor there. Or we try to avoid, you'll be sad, right? You're not into a master's, and because what you've done as part of part 2 is just substandard work. It's not at the level of master's degree. They'll downgrade it and just say we should just award you a postgraduate diploma. We don't want this because you are enrolled into a master's program for a reason, right? We have postgraduate diploma programs. If you wanted a postgraduate diploma, you would have enrolled into a postgraduate diploma program, right? So we try to avoid outcome, D, E, and oh my God, where still it's an outright fail. Now, usually the outright fail will happen if, listen, if you've just been neglecting work, or if you engage in academic dishonesty, is it? You cheat and they find out. Plagiarism, right? Copy pasting and all those things. But anyways, so we try to avoid this. And the same applies for those of you that are doing masters by research, right? So by thesis or something. Notice that the outcomes are more or less similar, is it? More or less similar. PhD, because we have a number of PhDs in here, we would love it if you could pass without any corrections or with minor corrections. The worst outcome that we are hoping for is moderate corrections, right? It would be sad if you spend almost an entire year, additional year to recollect data and stuff like that, right? Or reanalyze data here. So I hope this makes sense here. The goal of the course is to help you. This is why we're doing this actually. It's the reason why we extended invitation to our doctoral students, so that we learn together, I guess, and we avoid a lot of these problems here. And problems do exist. If you're doing this for Max, a reminder here that you have that, right, to look forward to here. Now, in terms of the course instructors, like I said, Professor Peter and myself will be leading this together with Dr. Nirenda, but a few other colleagues are going to come on. What we've done is we've left it open-ended, so we've sent an invitation to colleagues, and once they choose topics or areas that would want to participate in, details about them will be made available. My office is, this is odd, there's remnants from something very, very odd. My office is room 5. You won't find me there now because of what's happening at UNZA. UNZA is effectively closed here. But after June 22nd, if you want to come and see me, you will find me in room number 5 in the Department of Computing and Informatics. My office hours for this academic year, Mondays, I believe it's 9 up to 13 hours or something. I'm in the office or something like that. I don't know. I have to check. But if you want to chat to me about something now during this period, just you can send me a message and then we can do a virtual interaction or something, virtual meeting, and have a discussion. You can shoot me an email and then I'll do the best I can to respond. I'm not really sure how to do this. In terms of, sorry, somebody was calling here. I just had to cut the call here. Distraction. And I can't put my phone in airplane mode because I use my other, and I hope I'm still online here. I use my other phone, my phone, to confirm that I'm online and I'm not talking to myself here. But I wanted to mention that I'm here to chat to Professor P to see if we can just create a dedicated mailing list for 5019. It will be a lot easier because I'm trying to avoid what I had to do when I was, there's a WhatsApp group, but everybody hates WhatsApp here. WhatsApp is bad, right? Difficult to keep track of things, but trying to do this, when I'm sending a message like this, I have to send it to all the mailing lists, right? And this is too cumbersome. So it would be nice if we could just, we don't want to spam people that feel like this is not of value for them. So what I would do is I will likely create a mailing list and I'll send an invite via the WhatsApp groups and the mailing list. So I'll create a mailing list dedicated to this course. It will be like this, and please make sure you join this so that all information on and about this course will be shared via this mailing list. Easier that way, so that we just have one mailing list to use, just like we've done with these other programs or something. This conversation always pops up, academic dishonesty. There's going to be a dedicated discussion about academic dishonesty as it relates to research, but this applies to those of us that are doing this for grades, okay? And so obviously any form of malpractice, cheating and all that is not allowed. I'm going to say this, right? But I'll not name and shame here. I was administering a test, an in-person test the other time, and a student, she's a master's program, a student literally towards the end, I say it's time up now, can we have the script? This person has their phone and I'm not use the word shamelessly copying things from the phone, right? That's a serious offense here. And I should probably share I should share some of these policies from the UNZA so that you appreciate why this is important, right? It's so important that I think there's no warning for academic dishonesty at UNZA. It's outright dismissal if you're a member of staff. If you're a student and you're doing this for grades, and you are engaging in any form of academic, dishonesty, it's a 0 score. But anyway, so there's that. But we're going to have, I think we should have, we shall have conversations as they relate to unethical conduct when conducting research, right? Things like plagiarism, right? Surprise, surprise. If you engage in plagiarism and you're caught at the UNZA in your dissertation, it's an outright fail. I am told, quite sad that people would strip. So I'm told, somebody was telling me there are cases, a number of cases, cases of disciplinary kind of action and stuff, with disciplinary committees, right, where there is seemingly, apparently, people that have come forward and claimed that some people that have graduated didn't really do their research themselves. Somebody wrote work on their behalf or something like that. But anyway, so this is me telling you that, things like plagiarism, this is classic academic dishonesty, is it? These are taken serious at the UNZA. It's an outright fail. Okay, so, and usually what the UNZA does is they use a tool called, I know things have changed in the age of generative AI, right? Or in the age of the machine here. But in this particular case, the way tools like Turnitin work is if you have a dissertation, a manuscript, and you pass it through Turnitin, it will give you what's called a similarity score, is it? Okay? Now, it's called a similarity index, ideally. So what proportion of the text actually matches with things that already exist in literature? According to the UNZA, if the threshold exceeds 20%, it's an outright fail here. And I have a story to tell here, by the way. I was examining a student 2 years ago, I think it was, maybe 3. And the very first thing I do when I'm examining myself is I'll run the manuscript through Turnitin, yeah, to get a similarity score or something. Literally, right? This was sad, actually. The entire manuscript, well, the key portions of the manuscript, methodology, results, discussion, copy-pasted from a dissertation from University of KwaZulu-Natal, and some document on the UNZA repository. And I remember in the oral exam, after the student presented, the very first thing I taught them was that I don't think we should be wasting time here. It was a classic case of plagiarism. But it turns out that the student, apparently the argument from the student was they are visually impaired. And so they claimed, that's what they said here, there's no proof. They gave somebody else to write on their behalf. And that person is the one that plagiarized the content. But I'm just saying, right, that's an extreme example here. I'm just saying that this is some of the things that we should be discussing as they relate to academic dishonesty. Now, you see, one of the other things I wanted us to chat about here, the key issues to do with the regulations. I'm looking at the time here, but I was latching onto the regulations. I'm just going to skim through it and just mention to you that the current regulations, as they relate to the University of Zambia, outline exactly how or what is going to be done insofar as your graduate studies are concerned at the UNZA. Coursework, the research component, the end-to-end process, from admission, proposal, dissertation writing, attendance of important events. All of these are outlined in the document that I've been referring to here, right? You want to make sure that it's called the Regulations and Guidelines for Postgraduate Studies. You want to make sure that you have access to the 2024 guidelines, because I think on the DRD website, if you search from Google, you'll probably come across the previous version, which is really quite old. Things have changed here. Okay, so if you go here, you will find, you probably want to download this. It's a short document. Well, it is a long document in the sense of academia here. I'm going to share this, but I'll share this guidelines. It's just 108 pages. And the thing about this document is you're not really supposed to read it verbatim, ideally, right? It's a reference document. And this makes sense because it outlines the things that are going to be done at various stages of your academic journey. If you are in first year masters, things to do with how supervision is done, this won't apply to you, right? I'm just giving an example here. But if you are a master's, a doctoral student, for instance, you will notice that you will have to read this, because one of the things that they mention, if you go to page number 59, one of the things they're telling you is that you are entitled to a certain number of supervisors, is it? So if you're a PhD and you get a hold of this document, you realize, well, I'm supposed to be assigned one principal supervisor and one or more co-supervisors, not COR here, but co as in CO-supervisors, right? It's wrong here. Maybe, I don't know. This is wrong in type here. Things like this. And then more importantly, right? If I were you, I'll be reading clause 14.5, right? Why? Because there's something interesting about, and I'll use doctoral studies as an example, right? The goal is for you to demonstrate that you're capable of undertaking independent research. So no supervisor is going to push you, ideally. Nobody is going to tell you what to do, right? And for you to appreciate why your supervisor is behaving like that, you only appreciate that when you read this, right? But more importantly, right, if you're a current first year PhD, you want to read clause 14.1 note, because one of the things it outlines is minimum amount of time that you should expect to meet with your supervisor or something. So if you look at 14.8D, right, the role of the principal supervisor to supervise the student through monthly research meetings, right, yada, 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 these monthly meetings must be mandatory, right? And you realize if you look at the guidelines here that maybe the postgraduate coordinator will be reaching out to you shortly and tell you to say, can you send us all the forms that have been signed off by a supervisor to outline what you've discussed in your meetings and stuff like this. But the long and short of it is that this document treaty, if I were you, I'd download it and skim through it first, depending on what you're doing right now. Look at the various portions of the documents that I guess apply to you. But insofar as what we are doing is concerned in this course, I'm going to refer to this document over and over again, because one of the key things that everybody in here is going to do is you are going to prepare a dissertation. You're first of all going to prepare a proposal. Whether you're enrolled into CSC 6004, CSC 6000, or CSC 7000, you will do this. You will first of all prepare a proposal. The guidelines in clause 23 provide you with a structure, right? And, no pun intended, and guidelines on how you should prepare your proposal. So the structure. And this is important. It's in your best interest, especially if you're in first year, because if you veer off from this structure, if you're PhD first year, and you get to a stage where you're applying for ethical clearance approval, they will send you back, right? So I'm going to be referring to this. So when we look at literature review, you will find that I'll refer us to clause 23.1.5, right? And remind us, say, this is what is expected or something. So there is that, right? And then also, this may not apply to me, to apply to what Professor Piri is going to have a discussion to you with. When you're preparing a manuscript, although there's a literature review in the final manuscript, right? When you're preparing the thesis manuscript or dissertation manuscript, again, there are guidelines, right? Now, UNZA, like I said, has been around for a very long time, right? And most of the things you'll find in here will be recommendations, like a recommended citation style, referencing style. They don't say use SCM IEEE, right? They don't prescribe, they recommend, okay? But I want to draw attention to something we're going to refer to, the clause 24, which is procedure for preparing this decision manuscript. Again, we're going to refer to, especially the part to do with literature review. We'll talk about what sort of things you should take into account when you're preparing the final manuscript, ideally, if that makes sense. And then maybe with Professor Piri here, if you're a PhD, because for you to graduate, minimum 2 peer-reviewed journal articles, right? So you will have a discussion, or you'll get to the part of these guidelines that speak to where you should publish, and things like predatory journals and stuff like that. But I think we discussed predatory journals and different publication venues, I think, as part of literature review here. Anyways, so that's that, and this is again tied to publications. Tied to the final part you're doing here, to the fact that before you can graduate, you're supposed to publish or something. Okay. So this is 2008. What remains here is meant to be a gentle kind of like introduction to what the key thing we're going to cover. But because we're only remaining with 22 minutes, I'm going to suggest that we continue this discussion to next week. So we'll spend about an hour to maybe an hour and a half, because I'll also use a case example paper after we go through these steps. And then we'll start with maybe the very first stage or something. I'm going to pause here maybe and probably ask if people have any questions or concerns or something, or in fact even suggestions. By the way, you can send suggestions on what you think we can do better. It's going to be rough here because we want to strike a balance between generalizing what we are discussing, but also when it comes to use case examples, trying as much as possible that we have examples that are aligned with the different programs, is it? We have people that are doing masters/PhDs in health informatics, masters/PhD in data science, masters/PhD in AI, in computer science. All of those things are different, right? In fact, if you're a PhD and you've got into a stage with a supervisor where you're discussing the issue of novelty, you notice that people would have come up with general high-level things that are considered original contribution to the body of knowledge of computer science, artificial intelligence, and all those things. What is a novel contribution in health informatics may not be a novel contribution in computer science. What may be novel in information technology or information systems, because we have those programs, will not be a contribution to computer science. So we don't expect, or not we, anyway, your examiners are not going to take you seriously. And in fact, your supervisor won't tolerate this. If you're doing computer science and you are saying, oh, I'm going to do an analysis of the ZamGov port or something, and look at interoperability and stuff. Well, what has that got to do with computer science, right? I don't know. Okay, so maybe I'm going to pause here, colleagues, and perhaps ask if there are thoughts. I think we've already lost some people here. At some point, we had slightly more, and it's understandable here. Maybe some people in transit, going home from work. Some people have got to put their kids to bed or something like that. Any thoughts or questions about this? I will share the recording. I don't expect there to be a lot of questions and intro, but okay. I think people are tired. Yes, it's 2011. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you. We shall see you next week on Thursday.
Doc, I have a question. I'd like to seek clarity.
Yes.
For the Masters of Data Science.
Master of Computing and Data Science, yes.
I don't completely understand what the assessment structure is. Do we just do a proposal as part of the assessment, but don't do the final research project? And if we do have an exam, it's based on what? How to write a research?
No. So here's the thing. Whether you're doing, and maybe I may have confused people here. Whether you're doing, if you're doing this for credit. So if you have enrolled, which you have actually, all of you except for those doing health informatics, because they had a research methods course or something last term rather, but we're encouraging them to participate. Whether you're data science, AI, computer science, IT, IS, cybersecurity, you have CSC 5019 as a core course, okay? And because you have it as a core course, you shall write the exam. I need to get clarification here, but you shall write the exam. You will submit assignments to be graded. You will write the proposal. This is a part of an assignment. And usually, because I know it's Professor Piru who's going to handle this, what Professor Piru does is he forces you to propose something you'd want to work on next year. So in your case, next year, January, you will enroll into CSC 6004. And the very first thing you're doing as part of CSC 6004, Mr. Obi, is you want to defend your proposal and you submit the proposal. It's formally submitted to the school and all those things, right? But if you're doing part of that work this year, the period you're going to spend as part of CSC 6004 next year is going to be drastically reduced, okay? You will also write the test if there's going to be a test, because you're doing this for credit. However, for the PhD students, for the health informatics students, and for the master students that are senior, like second years, this doesn't apply to them, the assessment. So it applies. So you will do this. Now, I think you're probably conflicting. Your question is conflicting CSC 6004 and 5019. You will do this in year 2. We are doing this in year 1. Both of these, if you look at the structure of CSC 6000, there's a proposal for part 2, or for the capstone. There's a proposal and capstone for you, report, dissertation. And then in here again, one of the assignments is most likely going to involve you coming up with a proposal. Now, this is going to be, you can view this proposal as the very initial draft. Of course, this is zero draft, I guess. Not zero draft, but maybe draft 1 of your proposal. This would be the final proposal that is going to be submitted to the school for consideration, and the proposal that you're going to submit to NASREC for you to apply for ethical clearance approval. I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yes, you are. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Not knowing if there are any questions, thoughts, or clarifications. Okay. Thanks a lot. In case there are changes to the assessment structure, Professor Piri was out of office and he's been busy of late. So I haven't had the chance for us to finalize the assessment itself. Once we get confirmation, if he has suggestions on what else to include, we shall have a discussion about this. Colleagues, thank you very much. Unless if there are any other thoughts or questions. All right, thanks very much. And hopefully you can share with the rest of your colleagues about this. I think it's quite useful. I did something similar when I was a graduate student, master's. I had to, because I was doing this by research, and so I had to enroll into a course that we were doing for credit, and I saw value in what happened here. It turns out that it will prevent you from making a whole slew of mistakes along the way, so that you avoid a situation where you're a PhD, instead of doing this, you avoid doing this PhD in 5 years, 4 years, right? Maybe in 10 years. Sad right there. Thank you, colleagues. Good night.
Good night.